How's your people pop in? So I will just talk a little bit. Hopefully, a few more will join in. Um, Excited to be doing this presentation with Kurt Patel, co-founder of Media Hub. He and I have built a relationship over the last probably 3 months, and I think it came from a simple LinkedIn message Kurt sent me. And I'm like, hey, I'm going to follow up on this and see what they're all about. And we've had a great relationship and getting to know each other going forward. I just want to do a quick promo. At the end of this month, at the end of July, for the Ag Ventures Field Days, we're going to have a founder-to-founder meetup in Mason City at the North Iowa Area Community College, and we're going to be having a workshop on making the most of launch moments. And Laura Holbeck is actually on here listening in as well. So we're going to be excited to have Laura join us for that. It's going to be a very interactive workshop, and you'll really have some takeaways. I think really combine what we're going to learn here and then making the most of the launch mode. It's going to be a really nice tie-in. And then late afternoon, we'll jump into the whole field days events that'll be going on that Jordan and Spencer and that will be doing. So that's really good. So check that out. You should have received an email, or that should be coming out here the next day or two. Kathy, when does that go out next?
Later today.
Later today. Okay. So you should see that come out, and hope you guys all register for that. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce Kurt Patel and really get this going. At the end, we really want some questions. They're really experts in this, and they really do cater to the startup community, the startups, those looking for investment, as well as going out and starting to seek their first customers as well. So Kurt knows the space very well. And after the presentation, please, make sure you ask the questions, and let's just try to have a dialogue. I know for the most part, you as founders are really, really good at that. So with that, Kurt, thank you so much for doing this. I'll let you take over, and look forward to your presentation today. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for the introduction, Tim. Nice to meet you, everyone. Good to see some familiar faces as well. Excited to be here. And so I'll dive right in. Let's get to the fun stuff. Awesome. Perfect. Hopefully we can see my screen. Well, I want to first thank everyone for being here from their busy schedule. Today we're going to be talking about the power of presentation design and how you can transform your complex ideas into impactful visual storytelling. We're going to be looking at examples of investor pitch decks, sales presentations, some tips and tricks, resources where you can find information, and then also look at some real-life examples of how to really design slides that a lot of you founders are probably working on quite often. Overall, just a brief about us. We specialize in presentation design. We're now around 5 years old. Harry and I started the company in 2019. We've organically grown to a team of 20 expert designers. We've done over 700 investor pitch decks, and then a ton of other supporting presentations like board presentations and investor relation presentations, company overview decks, and things of that nature. We typically work with healthcare and technology companies, and we have experience working in engineering, manufacturing, enterprise, fintech areas as well, helping companies build presentations. Our real USP here is the fact that we have a multidisciplinary team. So our team has different backgrounds, from computer science to biomedical to finance to visual arts, and that combination really gives that fresh eye when we look at problem slides, solution slides, or speak to different technical and non-technical founders. We're able to bring that element of design. So being technical and then helping technical founders with design, that's really where we see a good fit for us. But overall, on today's agenda, we're going to be talking about the why, the what, and the how of a well-designed and an effective presentation. So why is it important for you to have a well-designed presentation, what it takes to go about it, and how do you actually do that? So we'll break each one of them down, starting with why. But just before that, we're going to be sharing this particular presentation as a PDF along with a downloadable template that is going to be for pitch decks. So everything I'm talking about right now, you'll have access to clickable links, and you can go back and download and use for yourself. So that, rest be assured, sit back and kind of just take everything in. We can have a nice fun Q&A at the end. Let's start with the first, right? The importance of a well-designed presentation. What really is a well-designed presentation, right? And oftentimes we get asked, make it pretty, right? Or it's always about the aesthetics. And in most cases, it's the design is a part of it, of course, but it's more about the experience, right? A well-designed presentation has a good story. It has a great flow. The messaging is clear. Design is a part of it, but the accessibility is considered for your audiences, how it's going to be delivered, and what's really the call to action. Oftentimes, a lot of these elements need to come together for there to be a really good, well-designed presentation. And so that's kind of how we define it. It's a combination of design and your overall experience. Why is it really important to have a well-designed presentation, right? And when you talk about the experience part of it, there's 3 use cases we can think of. First is a founder, right? If you're a founder, your goal is going to be likely to raise money. And for that, you're going to need a compelling pitch deck. And the end result, if you have a nice, compelling pitch deck that highlights your products, problem, solution, market fit, is that you'll be able to secure funds. Similarly, if you're a marketing leader, then your goal is to improve the company's branding, have a strong positioning. For that, you need some compelling sales collateral, and that's going to help you eventually achieve, better sales for your products or services and help establish credibility. And if you're a C-suite executive or on the leadership team, you're likely in charge of strategy, quarterly meetings, and for that, you need presentations that are compelling, that tell stories. And if you're, having internal presentations, they should be able to motivate employees to do better and more efficient work. So how you kind of break that down in terms of the experience matters a lot in presentation. But on the other hand, you could have the best team and the best product, but if your presentation lacks message, lacks story or a flow, and it just looks great, then it's like equipping them with not the best tools and resources. So it hampers your outcome of the presentation. Now, the second part is the basics of presentation design, and it's 3 important things: planning the presentation, and then designing, and then how to deliver the presentation. So let's break down each one of them. For planning, before you open PowerPoint, it's super important to get everything clear, right? With the team or as an independent, sit down and ask yourself, who's the audience? What's the goal of this presentation? How is it going to be presented? Is it going to be online, offline? So that's important. How much time do you have? Do you have 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes? Is it a demo day? Is it a town hall? Is it, in person? Is it an investor? Is it friends and family? And then what's the call to action at the end? What do you want from them? And how should the flow and structure should be? And it's different based on the audience you have. So the mistakes most people make is they'll have one presentation for everybody. You need to have variations of presentations depending on your audiences. So we'll look at 2 examples. The first one is, if you're building a pitch deck, your audience is going to be different. The goal is going to be different. Your call to action is going to be to secure funds. You're likely going to be in person. You'll have maybe 10 minutes or 15, depending on your stage and level of investment. And your flow and structure is going to be very different. You're going to be talking about your mission, your vision, your teams, your product, your business model, versus if you're working on a sales presentation, your audience could be different depending on your product, but your goal is different. Your call to action is going to be different. Your medium's likely going to be online. You'll have a little bit more time, and you're going to be talking more about problems and solutions and features and testimonials and building credibility that way. So it's super important in the planning phase to really understand who it's for and why it's important for them. And then as often people, they just start making presentations without really understanding the target audience. And so once you have the target audience in mind, the design and delivery phase becomes super easy and becomes super relevant for your audience and the goal of that presentation. So you don't want to build a presentation where you have 5 minutes and 50 slides, right? You're going to be rushing through each one of them. Or you're at a town hall and your font size is too small. So subtle things like that make all the impact, because you've done everything up until that date of presenting, and then small things, such as, font sizes and too many slides versus too little slides can make all the difference. Now, once you're done with planning, you then get into design. And we can dive into this and have a separate session on this, but in design, it's, from our experience, you just need to keep, 3 to 4 things in mind. And it's this, right? Margins, fonts, colors, and making sure that it's branded. So if you focus on the margins and make sure that they're consistent, that's the very key thing, is making sure it's consistent. Then automatically your content is going to be, reader friendly, and it's going to be seamless for anyone to follow from slide to slide. So that's the most important thing. When it comes to fonts, you want to make sure that you're only using 1, maybe 2 fonts, no more, right? Just because it creates, it will hamper your readability. And then colors, you want to make sure that they're branded to your brand, unless you're launching a new product and it has a new brand altogether. But make sure that it's consistent with your brand and aligned. And then overall, if you ensure these 4 things, your presentations will already be 90% better than most presentations out there. And then the final part is, planning, designing, and then delivery. Delivery, we don't dive too much into delivery with customers, but typically these are the things that, would need to keep in mind is, you're tailoring your presentations for your audience. You're keeping your message clear. Remember, you are the presentation. So how you present, focusing on yourself and not just reading from the slides is going to be super important. Telling stories, rehearsing, making sure that you have plenty of time to practice. And then that will eventually lead to confidence, which will just make sure that it's just that much more impactful. So delivery is also important. Now that we've kind of learned the basics of presentations, the process, we'll really dive into what we're here for, is pitch decks, right? Investor pitch decks. What we're going to do is we put together examples of slides along with some tips of when you're designing those particular slides. So everyone's familiar with these slides. It's typically the investor pitch decks have either some have all or some have few. What slides you choose largely depends on where you are in the funding round. But we'll kind of run through each one of them with an example of. So yeah, let's dive in. Starting with the cover slide, you want to make sure that you articulate change that your product is going to be bringing to the market, using taglines and graphics rather than just a logo. So instead of, just a logo, add a couple of elements that are visual and clean. And so you already have a good start to your presentation. When you're talking about an About Us slide, emphasize on the impact and the purpose. And by using compelling language and the mission, it really sets you apart, right? Then you can use images, you can use illustrations, but as you can see in this slide, it's very compelling. And without really even reading the content, you are already getting a good feel for what the slide or the deck or the mission vision really is, whether it's sustainability, green, or what it is. Team and advisory slides, it's one thing we've learned is 70% of the investment decisions comes from this particular slide, especially if you're an early stage company. So make sure that, in some cases we advise that this slide be at the very top, usually the top 3 or top 4. And you want to make sure you're highlighting experiences, expertise, showcase a founder market fit on this particular slide, and small things such as a nice, clean, polished headshot, short bio, and logos are huge. So if you have, great education or past companies that are super relevant, use logos, would just make it very easy to build that credibility. For problem slides, when you work on, use compelling stories, and you can back it up with data, statistics, illustrations. But as we see on this particular slide, and this is an actual customer of ours, we just redacted some of the information. On this particular ecosystem slide, it's not very efficient, and we're trying to intentionally show that, right? That there's a lot of overlap, there's redundancy, the system is chaotic. And so that clearly defines and showcases the problem. We're showing rather than telling. And in the same slide, we're able to convert that into a nice, clean, centralized platform highlighting, hey, here's where we fit in, and this is the solution that we're able to bring. So again, using nice, clean, impactful, visuals that focus on the solution, and that aligns with your core value proposition. So present your solutions realistically and innovatively. Mock-ups, illustrations, videos, demos is fantastic, if you have that. Now, moving on to product slides. You want to showcase high quality images and videos of them. Emphasize on how your product is practical and economical, and you can talk a little bit about your features, benefits, but again, keeping it clean, simple, and just focusing on product A, product B, product C, or just product A, and then just highlighting it through some images, visuals, would be great. And then you want to talk about how it works. Explain the process in a very simple term. You can do this as a flow chart, or you can introduce icons and depict the process. But as we see on this slide, it's very easy to follow. So highlighting the right, user journey or operational workflow in a nice and easy way, it's super helpful. And you can go a step further, and you can even add click animation. So if you have 3 to 4 processes, you can do click animation. So you're in full control of the slide and as you're explaining your product. Because if products are super technical, not all investors or not all audiences might be technical. So you want to make sure that you have them along, and explaining as you kind of go through it. Or when you talk about traction and milestone slides, showcase the progress, showcase momentum, and you can do this in multiple ways. And the way we've kind of also added notes to these slides is to also give you ideas when you go back and reflect on them. So again, depending on the stage of your startup, you can talk about customer growth. If it's been a couple of years, what that looks like year over year. You can talk about recent partnerships or past partnerships, some of the achievements, and then bringing those data and achievements by, to life on the slide by bolding them and just kind of, highlighting them. But if your startup is in very, very initial stages and yet to generate sales, you can even use statistics like website traffic or active users to bring that to life. Our experience working with pre-seed or even earlier stage companies, they don't typically have a lot of traction. But investors still seek some sort of indication of your company's viability, right? And so they want to see some sort of a product market fit, and you can bring that by just basic KPIs, as we mentioned. Perfect. So that was that slide. Moving into the why now slide, highlight why the problem needs to be solved now. Leverage market trends, technological developments, shifts in consumer behavior. The more up to date the slide, the better, and the more resonating that you can be with the investors. Use simple statements, graphs, charts, testimonials, and you can illustrate that as well to show growth potential, and to get the investors or the audience excited. When looking at market size, you can present it in a TAM, SAM, SOM, show different cuts of target markets and potential market shares. But you want to highlight trends and growth projections for slides. So here's a great example of what that slide can look like. And here's an alternative to what a market size can also look like. So again, just highlighting key market trends, growth projections, target audiences, and demographics. Now, moving into the go-to-market, the marketing plan type of a slide. When you're further along a little bit, you want to kind of just visualize a timeline that highlights key steps. What channels are you using to go to market? What tactics do you have? And how do you plan to reach your target audience? So here's a great little example of a slide that we recently created. And then going into business model, there's a couple of ways. We have two slides on how you can kind of visualize this. One is explaining it in a nice flow chart or an infographic that we have here, explaining the different type of pricing strategy that you have. Or you could also have something that breaks down really how you make money. And so you can talk about annual subscriptions, the cost, your customer acquisition cost, what the customer lifetime value can be, and then your payback periods and whatnot. So matrix like this really help break down for your investors or your audience and helps them understand the profitability and the potential revenue of the product. For the competitive advantage slide, you want to showcase your key strengths, your differentiators. And you can do that nicely with a table like this that's just very simple and easy to build out, that highlights, hey, here's how we're different. Here's everything we have that our competitors do or don't, or if they do, not all of them. And so a table is really clean way to present competitor information. Or you could use a 2x2 matrix to do the same thing. So again, two different ways to represent this information depending on the information you have available. But you can highlight your USPs and kind of, show your differentiation. Now, roadmap slides, highlighting key milestones, past achievements, future plans. You could use the timeline or a Gantt chart to do this. And nice and clean and very easy way to showcase, hey, here's where we've come from, here's where we are, and here's where we're going to go. You can go as far as 3 to 4 years in the future to really showcase and break it down quarterly, so that they understand what different milestones you are likely to hit. And then towards the end, this may be relevant for investor pitch decks or for your sales presentations as well. But overall, to build credibility, you want to add customer testimonials, quotes about your products, services, and that would really help you just build more credibility. For financial projection, present realistic and optimistic financial forecast. Oftentimes we've seen very early stage companies with some really astronomical numbers, which then really get hard to explain and justify. So we, just say, hey, keep it realistic and optimistic, include revenues, costs, profitability. And again, I think overall with all slides, anywhere where you can visualize the data and information, it's the best way to present it so that they can quickly glance at it, get a clear understanding of the trajectory of the financials, and then immediately go back to you and focusing on what you have to say, and then to have discussions around that. So that's kind of when we talk about financial projections. And then the money you're asking for and how that's going to be used, you want to specify the amounts. You want to break it down into a pie chart and show, hey, here's where that money is going to go, and this is how we're going to use it. Sometimes we've seen teams get too technical on this slide, but this is as far as we would recommend you to go initially, is show how the funds are going to be used, show the team you're likely going to be hiring or growing, and what you're planning to achieve with this initial fund. And then a thank you slide is, including making sure you have a strong call to action and you have your contact information for anybody to get in touch. Especially if you're reaching out to tens and hundreds of potential investors, you want to make sure that it's easy for them to find you. So again, overall, the goal of whether you call it or work on a teaser deck or an investor pitch deck should really be to get the investors excited and get you to the next booking or that next meeting, right? So overall, that's an overview of different type of slides that are used in an investor pitch deck, what they ideally look like, and some key pointers of what to look out for on each of those slides. Now, we'll take that same information and now we'll move on to a sales presentation. So we'll share actionable tips and insights, but based on our experience, a sales presentation is not very different from a pitch deck. So in a pitch deck, you're selling your ideas and convincing investors to give you money. But in a sales deck, you're selling your products and its benefits to your prospect. So similar, but a little bit different. And it can be broken down into 5 parts. We have initially the hook and problem, the solution, then you get into the about us section, showing social proof, and then really talking about what's next, pricing and everything. So your products and services are likely going to be unique, and your prospects and the size that would be what I mean to say is your products and services are unique. Your prospects and their size would be different. And for everyone, I think the customer journey will also be different. So there's not one slide that fits all. We can have a mix and match as well and move the flow around if necessary. But let me kind of walk you through each one and really highlight each point. So first and foremost, in a sales presentation, after doing dozens of decks, we always recommend starting with your problem slide. It should not be only about you. So talk about, empathize with them and talk about the cost, the magnitude of the problem that's currently being faced. And from there, you're indirectly saying that there is a need for solution. And then, here's kind of our solution. So this involves them into a discussion and you're not presenting your slides. And then based on that discussion of the problem, you can now talk slowly about your solution. If you have multiple offerings, you can focus on the product, the service, where your prospect seems to be most interested, by talking about benefits, impact, and quantifying time, money, and what savings your product can offer. And then once they're kind of sold on your product or solution, then you get into really establishing credibility and convincing them why you, right? So if you're selling, let's say, a monitoring app, why the prospect should buy from you and not from your competitors, you're going to talk about credibility, your USP, the differentiators, your social proofs, and you make it obvious that your prospect, that you should be their choice for purchase. So that's will help you kind of really solidify why you. And then in the last section, you don't want to end with just a thank you. Most companies do that. You want to give your prospect steps in what they can follow. So you can do this by maybe scheduling a demo or maybe offering a free trial if you're able to, and then leaving some time for Q&A, and then really having a discussion with them. So overall, if this overall flow is followed for the sales deck and each of these slides is addressed with the right information and content, then you'll have a nice, really clean, compelling sales presentation when you go on your next prospect meeting. Now, we talked about investor pitch decks. We talked about sales deck. Now we're going to go into some overall tips that we've learned having worked on hundreds of presentations. So the first and most important tip or insight is going to be the difference between a reading deck and a presenting deck. We see way too often in pitch decks and sales decks, most clients that we have, they only have one deck, right? And for all audiences. And so what we've learned is that there's no one size that fits all. You have to tailor your presentations based on the use case and the audiences, as we discussed earlier. So in this particular example, it's a product slide that is more of a reading deck. And so this likely would be a great leave behind deck. And the same slide can be transformed into a presenting version that has less text and just more visuals. This way, a presenter can speak about the features versus in letting the audience read it, and that enables the audience to focus more on the presenter. So again, this is more of a reading deck. You leave behind, there's more technical information. Sure, this would be a great way to do that. But if you're presenting, then you want to have a nice clean version. So they immediately see the product, glance at the features, and then they focus more on you as you're making your, your pitches and discussions. The second thing that I want to talk about here is the insight is making sure that the slides are audience specific, because each buyer persona is different. So for this particular sales deck, we ended up doing 3 versions of the same slide because the presentation was being used for doctors, patients, and employers, right? And so this particular slide was for doctors. The only thing that really changed was the image of a doctor, just to resonate more with doctors. The same thing with this particular image, where we changed from the doctor to the patient, so they're able to track their, diagnostics, reports, whatever's necessary. But if a patient's being introduced about the service, then it's just going to help them resonate more. And the same thing if it's an employer, then we've just replaced the images with an employer so that it resonates with the hospitals and their staff, and accordingly. So again, understand your audience, their age group, what the call to action is, and accordingly you can tweak minor things so that you have dynamic presentations that address different personas and different audiences. The third tip is to have slides in your appendix that you feel you don't need in the main presentation, but you might need it if you have Q&As or other type of discussions with certain investors. So some of those more technical slides, maybe having a demo of your platform or a more in-depth detail of anything that you want to share. You want to have all of that in the appendix slide ready to go in case that they ask you certain information. So always useful to have one nice master presentation with appendix and your key slides. Will just make sure that you're ready for your meetings. Fourth tip, we see decks that are way too long. And our advice is to add a navigation bar, because sometimes some investors want to jump straight to a section and say, hey, let's talk about your technology, tell me more. And so you want to immediately jump to that. And if you add a navigation, it just makes it very clean versus having to click through all the slides. So you can jump straight to technology, or you can jump straight to any other segment in your presentation. So adding a navigation is really nice, simple, easy to do. So those were some actionable tips and insights. Now, what I'm going to talk about is resources on how to do it. So these resources we use on a regular basis. And if you implement just a few of them, you would be able to design presentations really well yourself as well. So the first and foremost, if you have not already, go ahead and go out today and add BrightSlide, which is a free add-in, and it'll basically supercharge your presentations. It has tools like EasyGrid. It aligns slides automatically. It matches sides and multiple objects. You can swap different objects, format tables really quickly. So if you do this already, your slides are going to start to look really aligned and consistent. For images, and again, we're going to be sharing this presentation, so you can always go back, and these are going to be clickable links. But we, prefer Unsplash and FreePic, but you can use these websites for royalty-free images, and they're high quality. So again, depending on your industry, agriculture, or audience, or what, you can just kind of search specific keywords and find the right images. They're all royalty-free. So you don't have to go on Google search and then cite them or anything of that sort. So this is really handy. We use all the time. And then icons, you can really find all type of icons online, and we prefer Flaticon and Icon 8. So they have free and licensed version, but typically the free versions are enough to just build out any presentation. It's not usually a problem. So that's where you can go and find your icons. And then overall, if you just want to stick to PowerPoint library, then something quick and simple, you can go to insert, click on icons, and then you'll find something there. So there is still some feature there, but for more, you can go to the other icons and images and other websites that I highlighted. And that's pretty much it. So that sums it up, right from, we talked about why it's critical to have a well-designed presentation, the process that it should look like when you start to build these presentations, and how to actually, go about building them. So hopefully this help you build better presentations, create more audience engagement, better retention of information, and just more memorable presentations overall. Then we'll dive right into Q&A, and thank you.
Great, Kurt, thank you so much. Very good. I mean, everyone on here has done PowerPoint after PowerPoint. So hopefully, you've got some tips, some reinforcing some things you learned in the past, and maybe a few new tips and tricks as well. So let's open to questions. What questions do you have for Kirk and Harry? And Harry, thank you for joining us here as well as one of the co-founders. So appreciate you being here.
I know. Can you just ask or what's
Yeah,
that's fine. Okay.
Just unmute yourself and just ask the question, or put it in the chat as well if you like to do that.
Oh, I was just wondering if you guys have used some of the like Chat GPT or anything like that for image creation, and if that's been useful for you.
Yeah, we have, but not as often. So it's starting to become easier and easier to use. But if we need very custom images, like the image that you saw with the baseball player and the bat, that actually was AI generated. So if you have something super unique like that, you can just prompt, and you can get ideas and options. So yes, from time to time, we do use them.
And Kirk, I know you guys work with startups a lot that are making decks to pitch to investors, and but one of my questions is should sometimes we see founders that have they've got like a readable deck that they might send along, and then they've got a presentation deck and they're two different things. Is that what you would recommend, or how should a founder go about that?
Yeah, we would recommend having three things: a presenting deck, a leave behind deck, and then even a one-page summary. Because sometimes, and we end up creating all three either at one go or over a period of time. But investors will be like, hey, send over an executive summary or just a one-pager so we can quickly glance at it. I can circulate with my teams. That's really helpful. Leave behind decks we've seen are more useful for companies that have more information on their platform or their process. So that gives them more opportunity to really dive in deeper and give them the time. And then the pitch is really to just set credibility of, us, why us, the team, and more of that. Yeah.
And then the third thing you said was just the one pager.
Yeah, like a one pager, an executive summary, and it's just the layout is basically talking about the problem, solution, about, and yeah. So it's basically just taking your 10, 12 pitch deck slides into just one super compressed one pager.
Any founders in the audience have a reaction to that? Is that what you guys have been doing?
Well, certainly people have asked for it, right? So, I don't know that we were always prepared. We eventually got the one pager, which we had two, and we tried to, have a front and back and call it a one pager. But we unfortunately, as you go through that process, you realize that you need all three of those ahead of time, but we didn't know until we were down in through the process. So I think it's salient advice.
Yeah. And another thing I'd like to share too is a lot of presentations we see with early stage companies, or even seed and Series A sometimes, is the lack of visuals and illustrations and infographics. So, oftentimes the technology is great, the founders have fantastic. So if you have great relationships, that's going to help you obviously push things along better. But having good visuals will really open up more discussions with your investors, because if they really understand your technology or what you're doing that's unique and different, they'll pause just that much longer, and you're just going to have more opportunity for more meetings and discussions. So visual is, I think, super important, and that's where we spend a lot of our time helping founders really bring their ideas and concepts to life. Even that means sketches that get translated into digital, but so highly recommend spending time there.
This is Don Preiser. I'm curious about whether or not there's a process that you might recommend for those that have, the technical knowledge. They know the story. They know how to put it probably into words in the right way, but have absolutely no creative capability. And I fall into that category, where I struggle to figure out what's the best icon to use, what's the best picture to use. What you provided, I think, was very helpful, knowing there's sites that you can go to. You still have to have a creative mind in how to bring that to life in a visual way as compared to the words. So thoughts around that, and maybe this is ultimately a pitch for your company to say sometimes you need experts to just help you.
Yeah, that's exactly the problem that we solve, and we will have founders that are highly technical and say the same thing. Is like, I know exactly what to say, how to say it, I just don't know how to bring it to life. So our advice there would be, even if you don't hire someone like us or anybody else to go and do the design for you, even if you can get an expert advice and seek consultation to give you some pointers on how to go about it, that would be the best way to go. Just because what you're looking to do is not something small. So I wouldn't recommend you spend too much time spending that. I would say hire a consultant or an advisor or a designer, give you some insights on how to go about it. And then, so seek expert advice is my advice. But if you were to say, how could you do this yourself? Yes, we have some slides and structure that we internally follow, but it's more about just breaking down your story and then taking each of those key points and kind of just asking yourself, how can I visualize this, right? So can I do it through an icon? Can I do it through an infographic? Can I do it through a pie chart? Like, it's a process, but yeah, I'm not sure if that answered your question, but that's really what, seeking advice and then trying to dissect the information with some visuals.
Thanks, that was helpful.
Yeah.
Great. Any other questions from anybody? Any challenges you've had in doing your pitch deck? Any success stories that you founders like to talk about? Neil and Sheldon, you guys are just out of Ag Launch program. What's been your challenges in getting the word out about putting these decks together?
Getting the story across is the big thing. I guess one question I actually probably have is, are there certain colors that should not be used? Like if I look at my pitch deck from a year ago to today, I used our logo colors are red and black. So our pitch deck was red and black color. About 6 months ago, I changed it to a blue shade, couple of shades of blue, and actually left off the logo off of the pitch deck as well. So it's one of those things. I'm trying to read as much and look at pitch decks and see what has worked for other people, trying to incorporate, been using, looking at templates, so just trying to learn.
Yeah, that's a great question. There's no problem with using red or black. So if that's your brand colors and your logos, then I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's not about the color, it's how you use it. So if you overuse the red or overuse the black, that might be somewhere to kind of look into. Typically, if the companies have a primary, a secondary, a supplemental color, we'll run with that. But if not, and if you're early stage, we recommend looking at your 3 to 4 key competitors, right? You'll get an idea looking at the competition, what sort of colors and other palettes that they're using that are more widely accepted. And I would, go in that pattern initially until you have more foundation that's established and a very strong brand direction and a brand guide. Then you're okay. But if you have brand colors, no harm in sticking to them. Just don't overuse those colors. That would be the only advice. Yeah. And early stage companies, we just, we tend, because a lot of companies come to us and says, hey, we only have a logo, right? Help us with what fonts we should use, what color palettes we should have. And we don't spend a lot of time. We just take the industry, what does the industry, accept, and then we just run with that, because initially your decks are going to be more about story, your flow, your product, your experience, the team you have. That's where the bulk of the time and energy should be spent. Once you get more towards later stages, A, B, C, that's when you want to look more professional, consistent, and you want to make sure you're branded. You've probably gone through a branding exercise by that time as well. So initially, story, product, team is going to be the focus, and then design is just as colors and everything can just be neutral, should not be a problem. Hopefully that
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Tim, that's probably a good one to make a note of. Also some initial branding decisions and colors and that sort of thing. One thing that I've seen over the last couple of years is that sometimes startups will put together like a pitch memo, and it's actually like a 5 or 6 page written document if they're like Don, and maybe they can like write out the story really well but have trouble getting it into a pitch deck. And so sometimes we'll see that, and that 5 or 6 page pitch memo looks a lot like what we end up writing as our investment memo to present to our investment committee. Kirk, do you ever run into that? I kind of, at the same time that I say that, I don't think you can get away from having the deck to present, because we're always going to ask for that when you get the meeting with an investor anyway.
We do get that, I would say, quite often. And we usually use that to then do the design, because that actually has a lot more information and really gets us deep understanding of the company, the people, the platform. So we usually use that to then actually do the design. But if we get memos or more extensive, lengthy documents like that, for us, we just template them, put a header, footer, and then send it back, and then they just circulate with whoever they need to. So we do ask for that. Oftentimes we get talking track points as well from founders, because it has a lot more information. So we come across them, and we usually use them as well with the actual design. Mm-hmm.
Kirk, have you ever worked with a founder who highly technical solution and think that their message is on point, and you and your team are like, it makes no sense at all? How do you get that across to them that they're being way too technical? And the founder may say, well, they need to understand the science and they need to understand the process, but your end user is probably not. How do you message that with the founder when you start working with them?
Yeah, that's a good question. And this, if we work with healthcare companies, we tend to not go down that road, because it needs to be technical when they're talking about antibodies and, other type of solutions. So there they need to be really technical. With tech companies, it really depends on understanding the audience. If they are technical, and if it's a technical investor, we don't mind going down that road. But let's say if they have multiple features and different offerings of their platform, we ask them that they have multiple slides for each, but oftentimes they tend to cram everything into one. So either lead with one, but if you have multiple things, you can talk about a lot of it as well. But yeah, so you can have it depending on the audience. and then not have it depending on the audience that, you feel it's not going to resonate. So we've had, both experiences.
Any other questions?
Kirk, can you bring up your investment and use of funds slide quick?
Yes.
This one really stood out to me. I think this is a money slide here, guys. So I want it to sink in with you, because I think it hits all of the important things. It's how much you're raising, where it's going to, and then what your plan, like what your next milestones are with the raise. And those are like, they're just really key, or sometimes it's missed, and then the investor afterwards is thinking like, oh, what was it they were going to use the money for? Or so I think this was really, really good.
Yeah, thank you. And I think when we share this, each of the slide, the tips and the pointers, everything is carefully crafted and discussed internally. So these are all slides that we've similarly seen or created or have all the key information. So matrix, everything. So yes, thank you, and excited for everyone to reference this once we send it over.
All right, Kurt, tell us about one of your success stories. Give yourself an opportunity to brag a little bit. So what's one of the success stories that you're really proud of?
Oh, wow. Wow. I would say the success stories that really stand out to us is when we see the companies grow. So we've actually worked with quite a few companies that we've done from pre-seed all the way to Series C. And so when we work with them initially on the story deck at pre-seed and seed, and see them actually raise money and come to us a year later or 2 years later, we've seen that happen with the cybersecurity company out of Palo Alto that we helped with pre-seed, and now they're close to Series B. So we've actually worked with them through each of their raises, helping them, seeing them grow their team. We've gone from working with founders to then being introduced to their CMO, to their VP of marketing. And for us, it's not only just the pitch decks that we enjoy working on. We then eventually get, introduced to other teammates as they grow and work on sales presentations, board presentations. And then we actually have one customer that recently went public, and now we're working with their investor relation team. So for us, we enjoy working with companies where we are part of their journey. So I would say in the last 5 years we've been in business, 80% of the customers we've worked with again and again, at least once a year. So that's how we kind of measure success is, once we know their story and know their product or our service or their USP, then that's it. Everything else is just kind of adapting it to different needs at different stages, depending on the size of them. So that's kind of how we measure success, is how long we're working with them and kind of see them through from start to, from a few $100,000 to, multi-million-dollar deals. Yeah.
What is like
answer this a little? Oh, go ahead, John. Go ahead, John.
So what's a typical bill?
Yeah. So how can founders work with you and work with Media Hub?
That's a great question. So, right from the beginning, the way Harry and I have kind of structured our team, we're still a very small team. We do maybe 10 to 12 projects a month, no more, no less. That's kind of our capacity. And our ticket sizes can range from 3, 4, maybe to 8, 10, and then more of it is more of an ongoing type of a support. So we're still very approachable and understand that we work with early stage companies, so we still want to be accessible and affordable. We can help companies in multiple ways. We can help to say, hey, we have our content and all this message, but we need to really clarify our story and flow and structure and narrative. So we can help there, and then we take over and then do the actual design part. Or we can, if the story and narrative is already in place, we can help you with just the design. Some of the companies who are more farther along come to us and says, hey, we already have all that, what we need. Build a master template for us, which we can use for investor decks, we can use for sales deck, we can use for internal presentations. So we're seeing a lot of companies now build master templates that are consistent across the organization, that they help build out. So there's many ways we help, but everything we do for our customers is super custom. Harry and I are still kind of the face, and we drive discussions, and we work with our customers closely. So that's us. And Tim, I can share kind of our broader capabilities deck too with the team, just to get an idea of some recent work that we've done, how we operate, what that process looks like, milestones and stuff like that.
And just my testimony working with Kurt and his team have been a great communication back and forth, and I've really enjoyed the process. So Kurt and Harry, thank you so much for coming, sharing your story, and helping our founders. Founders, thank you for taking time today to join us. And again, just look out for the email on the founder to founder event coming for field trials on June 30th. We're gonna have a really exciting workshop during the day, and then engaging with our farmers in the late afternoon and the evening in Mason City at the North Iowa Area Community College, or as we call it, NIAC. So everybody, thank you very much, and have a great rest of your day.
Perfect. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.